Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today I'm joined with Sallyann Della Casa. How you doing, Sallyann?
I'm doing really well.
Great, great. Well, glad to have you in the show. For the listeners who don't know you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Uh, Thank you for asking. And first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm Sallyann Della Casa. I'm based out in Dubai, and I am the CEO and chief identity hacker of a community as a service platform called GLEAC. Uh, that's what I'm doing right now out here. What's really interesting about community as a service, people often say to me, "What exactly is that, and what exactly are you doing out there?" Um, it's a 2,500 plus of the world's leading experts, mentors, and coaches, and we bring them together and they operate as a collective wisdom cloud across governments and companies and organizations. It's a really interesting way to share knowledge, to have communities of practice. And, if I were to ask even you, Kirk, would you prefer to go learn something in a digital class, or would you prefer to just have access to somebody who's been there, done that, has deep knowledge on it? I think we know what the answer is, and most people feel that way. So, absolute privilege to be doing what I'm doing.
Nice. So, how did you get involved with community as a service? Because that's not a term I'd heard before. So, I'm curious how that kind of originated and what got you interested in it.
My goodness, it goes all the way back to my childhood, and I'll share this story with you. So, I originally come from a tiny island in the Caribbean called Trinidad and Tobago. And there's an exam in that country, and it's important that we understand this because it's our proximity to others that, for most of us, we get a seat at the table, right? So I go back to the Caribbean. At 9 years old, you write an exam. If you fail that exam, it's a British exam. It determines what middle school you go to, and you can actually look at the population across the Caribbean, and whoever got chosen at 9 years old to go to the right schools and had the right connections, they sit on all the boards, they run the country. And I'm talking about decades and decades. So imagine at 9 years old, your entire future and who you become is being determined. I just happen to be fortunate. I failed that exam. I just happened to be fortunate to be born into the right family who had the connections that got me into the good school. So I might not have been this version of myself, well educated, 5 degrees, Harvard, you name it, all the provenance. It could have gone completely the other way. So I was the benefit of that. And it's interesting, my whole entire life since I was 13, I've been mentoring, volunteering, creating systems to bring ambassadors, people to give people access to the right people, right? Even today, 70% of jobs or more is filled by somebody within your network. So community of a service, we have 90 countries in there, 50 plus domains. Literally, you're just 1 degree away from anyone that you need to access because degrees do not give you that, right? So many people are graduating, they can't find jobs. So many people are the most brilliant people in the world. They're just not invited to be at the table. They're just not in the right network. So that's why I built it from a real personal story that could have gone the other way for me. It went the other way for many people. I do it as a profit for GLEAC, and I have a not-for-profit foundation that does the exact same thing across school systems and jails across the Caribbean.
Nice. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I mean you're hitting at the fabric of society and culture of pretty much every country on the planet where they have these systems and the wealthy are capable of getting into the best schools and the best jobs and then you have capable people who have to fight, claw, and climb their way into those higher echelons. And I don't know that that'll ever change, but it's interesting to It's interesting to see. I mean, in your experience, I mean, you said it yourself. You had to kind of work hard to, you got into it, but then you obviously have to work hard to keep it. What, how should people be thinking about this? Because I think there's a lot of really smart investors out there, and then there's a lot of really smart people who don't have the pedigree. How should people be thinking about their personal growth in those areas? What should they be doing to get into the areas that they want to that they weren't kind of born into?
Sure. So, I have a word I use for it. And, I'll answer it in two parts. And that word is called quiet capital. And I think building your quiet capital is probably just as important, or maybe even more important than all of the traditional ornaments of what you want to get into, certificates, etc. That's one part of it. And the second part of it, that I will explain is, when you talk about people wanting to get into areas that they typically will not get into sometimes, and actually it's the majority of the time, the only thing that's stopping somebody from going for what seems impossible. I mean, I run a tech company. I have a patent on AI. I have zero tech background. Is proximity to what that looks and sounds and feels like in another human being, right? So when you think about, why we get so excited about one day there might be a female president in America, it's not the fact, I mean, it's not gender, it's that I can see what that looks and sounds and feels like. And that's just simple proximity. We found, and, the studies have found that whenever you are studying or whatever, high performance, it's having proximity to who has really done extremely well at those things that get you there. And the quiet capital part of it is, how do you build that, right? Like, how do I become any version of myself, right? I mean, if we're truly living tall and wide, we become different versions of ourselves. Hopefully, some of us every decade, some of us, sooner. Um, how do we get access and unlock those networks that we can very easily move into different versions of ourselves? And that is this thing called quiet capital, right? So quiet capital is, and it's made up of a couple of components. It's made up of your social capital, and this is your trust and reputation around you. It's made up of your ability to leverage networks around you, right? So when there is trust around you, when there's reputation around you, you automatically become a filter for networks. It's you having domain capital, that you're extremely either deep operationally, storytelling, context, contrarian outlier in a particular thing. Like you can't, ChatGPT actually is, you're exactly what it's not, right? You're able to be able to contextualize in different ways. And I think we are not teaching those things, right? Let's just think about the education system through university system when most of them can't find jobs. Quiet capital should actually be on as part of, just as important for credit every single year going through there. And how are you building that? And how are you building those networks? Because it's just so important in becoming the other versions of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a bunch of things I want to touch on. You mentioned one thing of, what it would be like to have a woman president in the U.S. I have this theory that it's going to be very hard for women to be president in the U.S., not because they're not capable, but because what it would take to become president makes them unappealing as a person. And there's something about women that are, if you think about the gender, they're warmer and they're softer, and there's things that make a woman and a man a man. And the things that make a man is some ways a little more aggression and maybe coarseness. But for a woman to take on that role, where they would have to take on that role to win because it's a hard fight, it makes them in that process less appealing.
Mm,
And
I disagree.
okay, I want to hear your opinion because I think women could be very capable presidents. I think that the process would strain out the things that make them who they are, Like there are a
Hmm.
lot of great women candidates that probably could be president, but I don't think they'd ever get there
Okay.
because the process would totally rip out those parts that are appealing, and because they'd have to do that to win. So go ahead. I'd love to hear your opinion.
Sure. So, I'm going to start with this. I think, politics as a whole, you need to have a really special, skin to make that decision, just to go into politics, right? Regardless of gender. That being said, where I originally come from, Trinidad and Tobago has a woman prime minister right now. It's her second time around being the female prime minister. The first time around, I actually went back to the country. I had grown up there till I was 8 and then was brought up abroad, in Europe and the US, had never been, I think every female who was very well educated, who had left and thought they were never going back to this country, all flew back, just to say, okay, we're here. There's one of us who is leading right now. And I would say the discussion you had about what makes women women and what makes men men, and I say this respectfully, our view of it is our own limitation of our own mental models. So your view of it is the limitation of your mental model. My view of it might be the limitation of my mental model of what a woman is supposed to be and do. I think within any leadership role, if we remove it out of politics, in any leadership role, what are we looking for? We're looking, particularly let's say in the world that we live in today, where everything is shifting and changing, it's moving parts. I think it's probably one of the most difficult times to lead as we look at our entire populations globally. Probably a lot of them are going to be without jobs very soon because of all these AI and AI agents and all of these things happening. And what are we looking for in a leader? We're looking for sound judgment and decision making. And you know what? That sound judgment and decision making is not going to be liked by many people, right? So, and I think our mental model is, well, women want to appease everyone, and is that nurturer, but sound judgment and decision making, many times, does not align with that version of how we or how others might see females mental models. We certainly need someone who is entrepreneurial in nature just because of the type of world that we're living in. Many people might argue, I'm an entrepreneur of a tech, AI, community as a service, we have tech, we have AI, entrepreneurial in nature. I mean, if we just look at the mental models around women being entrepreneurial in nature, less than 1% of funding goes to female founders. That's a mental model, right? That's a mental model of going, but no, like what it takes to be a hard nose, build a unicorn can't be a female. We're looking for, I mean, the things traditional will go, okay, yes, they have empathy. And yes, they might have, good communication skills. But we are also looking for someone who is agile, can influence, they don't have networks, right? The traditional things we look at in all kinds of leadership of, whether it's a board or wherever. I mean, a country is just a bigger version of running a company or an organization. And we hold back and go, maybe there might be some limitations with females. I personally do not believe that, but I will say this to you, Kirk. I don't have children. um, I don't think I would be able to do what I'm doing, raise capital, have a startup, cutting edge AI. I'm a unitasker, not a multitasker. If I didn't have support, and for most women who rise to the top, they have to have a support, like almost like a village. And many times that includes stay-at-home husbands, taking care of kids and all of those things. That's a non-traditional, that goes against, the wave of mental model of most of the world. But, let's look at Indra Nooyi, PepsiCo. If we look at other major leaders of big companies and organizations, their husband was carrying the load of what traditionally the wives would carry. And I think, the third thing is it's hard. I'm going to tell you this. I don't recommend leadership to a lot of people. Just leading a company, it's darn hard. Every single day is like one foot in courage, one foot in fear in the world that we're living in right now, going, oh my goodness, I don't know what, whiplash of a wave I'm going to get today. How am I going to go through this? I couldn't even imagine that at a country level, much less that I'm doing it as a scale up level.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some great points, and I think that there's definitely a difference between running a company and running a country,
Yeah.
and and this is the point I was getting at is it's not that women aren't capable; they're very capable, right? In some ways, more capable than men. Women and men have their strengths in different areas and their weaknesses in different
Sure.
areas. I think women tend to be um, they tend to have imposter syndrome more than men. They tend to not trust themselves or be confident enough in themselves as men are. Men are overly confident,
Mm-hmm.
probably more so than they should be sometimes. So I think we each have our strengths and weaknesses, but I think that what I was getting at was when you get into politics, it's different, right? When you're running a company, there's definitely politics there, but you're not slinging mud like you are in politics. Like
Mm-hmm.
politics, there's a lot of mudslinging. You're trying to make the other person look bad. I mean, take it for instance, Hillary Clinton, and we don't talk politics as a show, but I think it's a good example. When she ran against Trump, I mean, she is the traditional politician. She's probably the best politician of our era, and I say politician in pejorative somewhat because
Yeah.
we don't look at politicians in a positive light. But she was really good at the game, probably one of the best at the game. And she ran
Sure.
against Trump, who is this boorish individual that was unlikable. He didn't appeal to a lot of people because people wanted their president to be polished and perfect, and they want all these things. And here you got this gruff guy who's coming in and getting things done like he's running a company. Um, and I think in some ways, even though some people might not agree, you could argue that the output is more positive than a typical politician. You don't like how he does it, but you like the output. And I think you talk about mental models, there's a difference between the perspective of things and the reality of things. Like there are
Mm.
people who look really good on the surface and they get nothing done. And there's
Sure.
people who just are, just grinders and then what they do isn't pretty. And I use Trump as an example because he's so extreme in one example. Like he gets things done. You don't like how he does it, but it's like, you got it done. Okay. All right. I'm going to shut up. But you don't like how he does it because it reflects on you, right? A leader reflects on the team. And so we don't like the reflection that he gives on us. Um, and I think you make that point about leadership. Leadership is about a lot of things, and
Yeah.
judgment, decision making is part of it. Um, but in many ways, leadership, and you said this yourself, like in your experience, and I'm a leader in my company too, it's a lonely job. Like when you're
Yeah.
making decisions, you're stuck with the decision, and people may not like it, even though it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But you're the one, the buck stops here. Like I have to make this decision. It's the right thing to do. People are going to hate me, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that's the challenge with a lot of leaders is, in my opinion, and I give talks once in a while about this, about leadership. And when I ask people, come up with names of the top leaders that are good leaders, and I usually hear a blank silence,
Yeah.
like crickets. Because when I was growing up, you could name leaders. There were
Yeah.
leaders in sport, there were leaders in media, there were leaders who were, you could argue, politicians, but more so than now. In business, there were leaders that you could point to and say, that person's a good leader. Now, crickets.
Yeah.
And you think of the good leaders, it's basically military leaders because they're in the traditional leadership role. But even then, there's not a lot of great ones, but there's some. Like I think of like Jocko Willink is a good model of a leader. Um, and I listen to him talk, and it's just epitomizes what I think a leader should be. Um, but when you look in society, they just don't exist. We lack leadership in our society, and that's probably one of the things that is needed most is leadership.
Mhm.
And for so many reasons, this is the case. But how do you leadership's a hard role, right? And you talked about it. You're trying to do it all. I I say this all the time, you know, to women, like you can't have it all. Sorry, like it's. I know the women's movement tried to tell you can have it all. You can't. Like you can't be a professional and a mom and be good at both. Like my wife tries to do it, and It's like if you want to be the best parent for your kids, it's really hard to be that and be great at your profession. Like there's not enough time in the day. You may want to, you may have the ability to, but like, I want to be great at my job. I'm giving up something for my kids. And I try to do both, but I'm always leaving something on the table. And women have a more complicated role. Than men do traditionally, because men are typically the providers. Yeah, I know it's not always this, but men are traditionally the providers, is how we see ourselves, and women are traditionally taking care of the kids, even though that's not always the case. But women have a more complicated role than men do, and so I don't know how they do it. I really don't. I give them a lot of
So
credit because
I'm gonna jump in here
please
and
do.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna remove it from gender, right? Because I think um, men also do not have it all, right? You can't be the present father, you cannot be the there all the time, and also, be the master of the universe in companies and your organization. The fact that, men have partners doing that, and there are many men who I remember once at Women's Day, giving a talk, and I talked about, you know, we often in Women's Day talk about, women getting the sore side of the story. But you know what? Like men got the sore side of the story too, right? Since they're kids, well, what are we telling them? You need to grow up and you need to man up and not cry and provide for a family. What if the guy just said, I want to be a stay-at-home dad and like take care of my kids, and I don't want to have to be told from a kid, like, what if I want to share my emotions, and I want to be this, right? So the stories that we tell goes to the mental model of what it is we see in society, right? In terms of our what we play out. A second point that you made that, I do want to address is, we often talk about, or the term is often thrown around women and imposter syndrome. The history of that term was made up in a lab, by the way, by some scientists. Um, you know,
Like
uh,
most things, by some
right? Like,
do-gooder wants to do good and says, "I made up this thing."
and at the end of the day, fundamentally, what is it? It's about risk, right? What is, at the end of the day, if we really look at what imposter syndrome is that males are much more risk tolerant because as a kid, they were told, go jump off of things, break things. And the females were told, be careful. No, you don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself, but you're a girl. And imposter syndrome is only about women who have this mental model in their head going, okay, I need to be extra careful about, doing things. I need to make sure all the dots are checked. I mean, need to make sure nothing breaks. That's all it is. But it goes back to our mental models of our ancestors and our that gets passed on to us, in terms of that. So that term I particularly, don't really care for. And, the third thing around, in terms of, leadership, and, then we can, kind of move forward a little bit. It is extremely lonely. Um, and the reason why I think sometimes men compartmentalize very well emotionally. Women, just how we're built, right? It's one of those things in our genetics. We don't compartmentalize very well. So it's very difficult. Some of us are more male oriented in terms of how we compartmentalize. I'm one of those. I'm very clear on, it's probably why I can lead so well. I don't take any of it. Like whatever gets thrown at me, but I recognize I'm built a little bit different. But because we don't do that by nature and default, and it's just in the DNA and how we're built, it could be where that misconception kind of comes up about, handling all of the different parts, and nobody can have it all. Nobody can have it all at the same time. You can have it all, women and men. It's just timing, right? Anything that you put your pedal down on, that you want to knock it out of the park and do really well at it, something needs to give. It's just that simple, right? And in many cases for women, it's family, right? Which is, again, mental model about what taking care of a family looks like. But no, nobody can have it all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing you mentioned. I want to touch on this before we move forward, and I want to talk about AI a little bit. But you talk about how we're kind of brought up, men and women. I will say, being a guy and having two boys and reading a lot about this, men and boys are risk takers. It's not just how we're brought up. Boys learn through taking risk. They learn
Hmm.
by pushing boundaries.
Hmm.
And there was a great podcast I listened to years ago when my boys were younger, and it outlined it, I think, so well, is that boys learn by taking risk. I can't speak to girls because I don't have girls and I'm not a girl, so I can't
I
speak
have
to
no
the experience.
children, so I can't speak to any.
Yeah, I'm just going by what I learned because I didn't have to learn about girls because I don't have them, so someone else can learn about that. But but I know from my experience and from having boys, like the boys learn by taking risks and they push by pushing boundaries. So the thing with boys is you have to give them boundaries. If you give them boundaries, they will feel comfortable and they will feel secure.
Hmm.
But they will always push them.
Yeah.
Always. That's their nature. That's how they learn is by taking risk.
Hmm.
And um what's interesting is the educational system and society, um, some cases penalize them by taking risk.
Hmm.
And so, you think of schools, they're mainly designed for girls. I mean, in how girls are more operating, it's like boys have this energy, oh, sit still or you don't have recess. It's like, no, I need recess. That's why I can't sit still. And so, what's fascinating to me is like we have schooling that was created decades ago in the Industrial Revolution to generate cogs in an assembly line, and it's starting to change now. But I really hope that they start to recognize some of the needs of children as they grow, and allowing them to, like, here's an example: take a test by yourself, and what you know determines how you do. It's like that's not life. Life
Yeah.
isn't sitting in a box. Life is, hey, let me collaborate with five other people and let's see if we can come up with a good
Yeah.
answer
That's
together.
going to change, right? Like,
That's
so I
life. Why not change that?
absolutely. So there's two things I want to add, which I think you would love. I read this week, I want to tell you it's in Maryland, but it's in the news this week that there is a teacher who decided for detention, you needed to go hike outdoors. And the kids initially all revolted. They were like, what? But it has turned out to be the best thing that has happened in the school because those that were getting into trouble, the fact that they were outdoors now in nature for an hour and they had to hike as detention. I mean, we all know the impact of nature. There's enough studies on that. And this is like this new thing now that they realize. And I read it and I sent it to one of the coaches in the community who does a lot of coaching on toxic cultures. And I said to her, what if whenever you go into coach on toxic cultures, you tell everybody they need to go on a nature walk with each other for the next month, every whatever? I said, I bet it will just sort itself out.
Yeah,
Right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when my kids were younger, they had some kids in their class who were hyperactive, and the teachers are like, before they come in, make them do laps around the school,
Yeah.
tire them out, and it worked, and they never had any problems. And I think a lot of people have this they have this jittery
Yeah.
energy they need to get rid of. So I agree. I think it would be a good
Yeah.
good
And
use.
then, talking about the AI part, I think AI has been the best thing that could have happened in education for our children. I'm gonna, we can certainly get into the adult conversation, but I don't think anything would have moved educators and parents, right? Because the system has been stuck. I mean, who are the main stakeholders? The educators and the parents, right? Like as much as parents complain, parents are the active participant who has done nothing about, they still continue to pay dues every month or every quarter or whatever else for the system to just function as it is. So, I think the best thing that could have happened to education is AI. The reality is that it's been stuck in dinosaur age, and I don't think it would have moved anywhere but for AI forcing teachers and parents, because parents complain, but you know what? Parents have done nothing. They've been a compliant participant in the lack of change in the education system by, paying dues and not complaining and just going through the system of, I have a safe place my child can be. And the reality is that, AI now forces everybody with their backs against the wall because the parents are facing the squeeze themselves in their job roles. And they have to wake up and realize, wait a minute, if this is the squeeze I'm feeling, what's going to happen to my child? And I think that has forced them into a pressure cooker. And I think, them being forced in the pressure cooker is, they're the funders of education, right? At the end of the day, has forced now educators to really go, wait a minute, what's going on? And I think we will finally see education transform like it's never done before in the next year or two.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about AI. I think that in some ways it's great, and I think some ways it's terrible. It's kind of like social media. Like when social media came out, it was really cool. You got to connect with your friends, people you never talked to, and then it turned into this cesspool of hate. And people just wanted to get on there and they just start yelling at each other. And you can still share, but it's changed our society in many ways. And I feel like in a different way, AI is going to be something similar. So when I use AI, it can save me a lot of time, but it also, the way I would describe it is this: when you're trying to learn something, part of the process of learning is the discovery. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I got to learn about this thing. Let me go look up resources. Let me go on Google. Let me read it. Like, oh, I got this thing. All right, now let me find another article. Let me do this. And let me. So you kind of go down this rabbit hole and this tree of like, well, all
Sure.
right, it says this, but I don't know what this term means. And you go down here, and so you learn all this stuff, right? This learning process that you go through. Whereas AI just goes beep. All right, there's the answer. And so your brain doesn't go through the process of learning, and so you don't retain it. And I feel like it cranks something out. I'm like, all right, that's decent, even though it's missing the emotional piece. Like there's no story or emotion in there. But clinically, it's fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. But it makes me wonder, um, what is AI going to look like, and is this going to uh, negatively impact learning because now kids don't have to learn. They just crank something out in AI. And the second part of that is, are we teaching them the right way to begin with? Just memorizing stuff is no longer useful when you have Google or AI. So, should we just revamp the entire education system to teach people tools that are valuable and not tools that are from 30 years old?
So, I'll answer, it in two parts, right? I mean, were our kids anyway learning critical thinking, judgment and decision making, creativity, communication, collaboration? Were they really even learning those things in the existing school system? Right? I'm going to beg
Definitely
that
not.
question. But were they
Definitely
just
not.
memorizing or, some test at the end of the whatever? And if I were to ask you, myself, or anybody else, do you remember a single thing you learned in college and applied it or high school and did it matter? The answer was no, right? The answer absolutely is no, right? What we do give children and through our education system is we give them the opportunity in a psychologically safe environment to have our first social ties outside of our families. We allow them to it's almost like the bridge of social, that quiet capital I talked to you about. Because if most of us look at our most sacred social ties that were the safest ones, it comes from our college years, or it comes from our from those years. So we were giving them that. It was certainly not any of the skills, or the majority of the skills that they needed, to thrive, that you are talking about. So you were talking about going down a rabbit hole. That's curiosity, right? That's not happening in most traditional school systems. So does it beg the question that it forces us now, AI, to look at the actual real gaps that were already there in the system. And now we do have to create a system from scratch based on those things, I was talking about, those human skills and quiet capital, because that's all along, that's all that what really mattered. And going down that rabbit hole, and with all respect, I have the biggest respect for teachers. At the end of the day, I'm fundamentally a teacher by DNA. But I will say this: can a career teacher truly prepare your child for the world that's out there? I mean, I mean,
It's a good
the,
question.
right? The answer is probably no, particularly if they're a now, could they be a great mentor and coach and nurturer and around all of those things I just talked about? Absolutely. Could they really prepare? Though the answer is no. And but now, if your child, or if you come from a background where you don't have access to quality of thought and mental models, you don't have proximity, AI gives you a glimpse of that. I wonder what a whoever might think about this. Okay, I'm going to look down a rabbit hole on this particular thing. Okay, I want to do it with Elon Musk and Barack Obama and I don't know, Trump. And what does that look and sound like? All of a sudden, I've opened up. So I think for me, the wins far outweigh the negatives. Rightfully, you mentioned, it feels like the internet and, bad things can happen, but it's not the technology, it's us humans that make bad things happen. On how we go about using this technology to exponentially spread hate, negativity, whatever. It's not the technology in itself, it's what we do, right? It's just our deep flaws as human beings. And how do you control it? How do you create guardrails with technology that can be so brilliant? But how do you protect it from us?
Well, it's a great point because AI learns from us, and
Yes.
and if it's learning from us, it's learning from our flawed nature, and it becomes flawed, so it becomes us, and that's a
And
scary
that,
thought. Um, here,
and
here, go ahead.
go ahead, please,
Oh, well,
because I
I had a deviant
tell me.
question, which is something that I've been thinking about for a while. Um, So if you think about AI, right? Let's say we create AI and it's perfect and it comes up with the best solutions and we're using it. Well, we look at the answer and we don't like the answer. We're like, well, that's wrong, right? And so if you think about mental models, right? And you're talking about a lot about mental models, and I think a lot about them too. So if you think about mental models, let's say we create something and it gives you all the answers to life that you ever need. And we don't like the answers. So we're just going to say, yeah, we don't like this. We're going to scrap it. We're going to create something different because we don't want to hear things that don't align with how we see the world.
Mhm,
And we all want to align how we see the world with a reality, but we don't see reality, right?
mhm,
How do Democrats and Republicans see the same set of facts and come up with two completely different conclusions? It's because we
mhm,
don't see reality the same. We never,
mhm.
people don't. No, nobody does. Like it's just not how we process the world. So if you think about it, like with something like AI, are we going to create this perfect tool, or are we just going to create another version of ourselves? And is that
So
going to be beneficial or not?
yeah, so I always say this: AI represents gray, right? AI represents not the top outliers. So that's why when I go back to community as a service and they're like, people often say to me, why does your community matter? And I said, AI does not have that. I call them the top tail and the bottom tail, the outliers and the contrarians, and those with deep contextual knowledge and stories, right? So I think about our ancestors. How was knowledge transferred? And when you were asking me that, you said leadership, it was clear to you before, and now it's blurred. It was clear before because leadership had contextual stories. It was very clear to us when we did not have the internet, the stories attached. And with those stories came emotions. And with those stories came the inward connectivity going, oh, okay, I identify with, he did that. And he became, now with the internet. And as I said to you, all the gray, it's unclear, very much unclear now what a leader is because we've lost that. So AI represents that gray. It is not 100% of who we are and who the best of us are, who the worst of us are. and who the deep operational people are. And I think this is the first thing we need to teach, and we need to make sure young people understand. When you say, what do I teach them about AI is, I often say it's the sheep, right? AI is the sheep. AI is not the lion. And AI is, not whatever we might consider, the bottom of the pyramid to be. Um, so once as we understand that, then when AI feeds us an answer or feeds us, we have already that filter of going, this is not all of us. This answer is not representative. This answer is, the typical, most of it, until recently, it was fed by Reddit. I don't know if you've gone on Reddit or gone on Quora or any of those, maybe 1% of the stuff on there is valuable. The rest of it is our garbage, that's kind of out there. So I think the education, what we forget is if we explain to a young person or adult how it came about and they understand how, then they can actually have critical thinking and judgment and decision making and all of those things around it to go, oh, okay, but right. So, that's kind of how I feel about it in terms of AI.
Yeah, I know we used to teach critical thinking in our schools, and we no longer do that. So that's
Yeah, it's
very,
mind-boggling.
very
It's
unfortunate.
mind-boggling. Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of them, right? Like if you think about all of those, the quiet capital mix and the human skills mix, maybe finally it forces us to treat those as the core competencies of going through the education system. And then maybe the schools might survive. So, how we talk about, I think it was something like last year, 100 universities in the US closed. I don't know what the numbers are. We're talking about cliffs, enrollment down. I mean, has someone kind of sat back and go, wait a minute, we really shouldn't be teaching the hard skills because AI can probably do that way better than us. We should be teaching them, you are right, tools. And what if we designed around the things that will really get them ahead, the quiet capital and the human skills? Maybe that's a great experiment to run in the system.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think the educational system should survive. I mean, there's too much baked in things in the system. I mean, I had a conversation with a guy from MIT about 12 years ago, and I was curious, and I said, why, um, with all the technology you guys have, why are you not creating an online university? Why wouldn't you do that? It's simple. The technology's there. And he said, I know I've been fighting this fight with the administration for a long time. They won't do it. A lot of people feel like, well, their value is the in-person learning. I'm like, yeah,
Mm,
but people learn online all the time. You can get a free college education now. You don't need to pay for college.
yeah.
You won't get the diploma, but you'll have the knowledge. You can do that. So why wouldn't you do that? Now, my thesis is if they do that, there'll be one college left, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
it's the value of one. There's only one Microsoft. There's only one Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you become that big and you're the best, there's only one. So I think there's too much entrenched power and money in there for it to change. But I would love to see it change where somebody actually comes out and creates a university that does all of the things that we've been talking about today. Because we do need more leaders in our society. But as we kind of wrap it up here, um, let's kind of wrap this into the investing world. So you're talking about the quiet capital. We all we need more leaders. Corporate America, some of them are really great and some of them are mediocre. But if somebody's looking to invest, one of the things they should look at is management and leadership. That is one of the categories that investors should look at. So, what do you think, as we kind of wrap it up and you give your final thoughts, what do you think is necessary for a leader, for a good leader, to survive in the next 10, 20 years?
I don't know the answer for the next 10, 20 years because we might not be useful
How
in a
about now?
leadership role
Just
in the
today.
next 10 or 20 years, right? But I would say certainly right now over the next 5 years, because within this time period, within the next couple of years, we will hit AGI. And I do think that most leadership will be co-leadership, probably with some kind of AI agent or AI tool. That's what I foresee if we're smart about it. And the leaders that are going to be at the forefront of that, who will survive, are the ones who are, and I think some of the traditional things, very agile. Leadership is going to look and sound very, very different. I think it's going to be the ones who have either depth. So, we talked a long while about having a lot of breadth. I think people who have deep depth is going to become very, very important in certain areas, because they're the ones who can guide brand new workflows, et cetera, with managing an AI workforce and a team. You might not be managing people anymore as a leader. You might not have managers anymore, right? Because you don't need managers when you have that layer. I think your learning agility, your ability to learn. And I do think your quiet capital, your reputation, your stories, your context, your networks, I think these are going to become the most valuable traits of leadership over the next couple of years. I think the traditional look at the leader that we have today, I think that's going to disappear.
Interesting. Well, Sally, I appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find more about you?
Sure. So they can go to our website, gleac.com, and learn all about community as a service. We're just about to launch the first UBI Universal Basic Income project around mentors. I think a lot of people are excited about that. So I encourage you to go on the website and learn. And certainly you can find me on LinkedIn, Sallyann Della Casa.
Awesome. Well, Sallyann, I appreciate you coming on the show. And yeah, we'll have you back on in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. Mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room.
All right. Well, I really appreciate Sallyann coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show. We have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, everybody. How are we doing today?
We're doing great. Doing great. We also have our very own Phil Weiss. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Kirk. Good to be here today.
I'm glad you could join us. It's the holidays. We're having a whole lot of holiday cheer over here. So let's dive right into it. So, Barb, what were some of your takeaways from the interview?
Is 8 a.m. too early to start drinking?
It's never too early to start drinking, Barb, if you have to ask that question.
Okay, so I found this really fascinating to listen to. I'm going to be really transparent here and say I'm not sure I understood everything she was talking about, But my takeaway from a very basic level is we all need networks to help us get stuff done and to advance. And the more you can create networks in your own life, the more you can proceed and learn from others and from mentors.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good perspective. Phil, what are some of your thoughts on, quiet capital and the intangible side of capital when it comes to businesses?
It's something that, if I go back to my tax days, was really important because I used to do transfer pricing work. And transfer pricing is basically when a company has subsidiaries around the world that do different functions. We had to do a functional analysis of the company's business to understand what value should be attributed where. And the intangibles were such an important part of that. It can range from things like, so I worked for a company that made needles. And one of the most important things that added value to their product was how sharp the needle is. And that's not something that they want to patent, because if it's patent, people can create and design around it. So it becomes know-how. But the sharper the needle is, it kind of seems counterintuitive, but it actually is better to have a sharp needle because it goes in easier. So there's less pain for you. But like that's an example of of intangible capital. You have plenty of companies. Like from an accounting perspective, this has been something that's always leads to question when you look at companies like Coca-Cola, right? Look at it, right? Where's Coca-Cola's value? It's in the formula that makes Coke, and it's in its brand name. And that's not something that's captured in the financial statements anywhere. And there's so many other companies like that. I mean, they do studies, I think it's pretty much annually, or what are the most valuable brands? That's another example of intangible value. Know-how is so important. Manufacturing processes, those are all important. And now we have AI, which is bringing all different things into the equation. And Barb mentioned networking. I mean, and that's important too. And that's an intangible because I can't put a price on it. I just know that it's value. Like that's the thing about when I think about intangible value, is the idea that I can't really put a price on it, but I know that it's worth something. And if I'm using it in an investing context, it's up to me as an investor to determine what that value is, because that value helps determine what an asset's worth.
So, I mean, I'm curious how you even begin to do stuff like that. Because, I mean, what she was talking about were things like, networks or, trust and reputation, things like that, like community. Like those are things I mean, depending on the company, you might not even be able to identify. You might not even be able to see it, right? The CEO is, the chief pom pom waver, as most of them are, and they've got these really deep and wide connections and very trustworthy people. Like, how do you even begin to identify the value of that? I mean, you all might say, "Oh, they're a really trustworthy person." Great. Now what? Like, I mean, that's if you're managing a portfolio. I mean, Warren Buffett talks about this. Like, he looks for people that are trustworthy and I forget the quote. I'll try to find it. But he talks about this and how he wants to find people that are trustworthy. Like that's one of his criteria, as it should be, right? You don't want to invest with a crook because who knows what they're going to do. So, I mean, how do you even wrap your mind around that? Like, what do you guys think?
So it's okay if I jump in
Yeah, go
first.
go ahead, Phil. Yeah.
So I think back to when I was an analyst, and one of the best calls I made was on a company called Chesapeake Energy, which has subsequently gone bankrupt. And when people think about Buffett, since you brought him up, everybody thinks about Buffett as a value investor, and his roots were to Ben Graham, who was kind of like the father of value investing. But later on, when he met Charlie Munger, and Charlie Munger brought the quality side into the equation, and one of the people that influenced Buffett is Phil Fisher. And Phil Fisher wrote, I remember I read this book many years ago. It was still one of my favorite books on investing, and it's Common Stocks, Uncommon Profits. And in the book, Fisher has a list of 10 things, and these are qualitative factors to look at when you're analyzing a company. And so when I was an analyst, I would listen sometimes I would just read transcripts for conference calls, but sometimes I would listen. I didn't really want to get on and say nice quarter guys and all that other garbage, but I would listen. And I remember when I first started, I was on an interview on a Wall Street transcript about the industry, and they asked me who your favorite CEO was. And I said, one of my favorite CEOs was Aubrey McClendon. And he was the CEO of Chesapeake. And then I'd be listening to Aubrey's conference calls. And I heard him say, we have the best hedging program in the business, and we make a lot of money from that. We have the best weather forecasters in the business, and we have the lowest cost structure, and like all these things. And so one of Fisher's 10 points is to avoid highly promotional management teams. So I started to hear Aubrey say that, and it raised questions. And I went and looked, and I found things that really made me question what he said. But Fisher, in the back of my head, saying avoid highly promotional management teams was what led me to investigate and try to find out what was really behind this. And I found that there were a lot of things from an accounting perspective that the company was doing that I questioned, but it was really thinking about that qualitative factor about avoiding the highly promotional management team that even got me to look further. And like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, Chesapeake overspent, and I mean, we suspect that Aubrey killed himself driving too fast around a curve on a road because there was a lot of pressure. There were a lot of things going on with that company. I mean, I would go out to their shareholders meeting. And when you go to a company shareholder meeting, as an analyst, they give you a gift. I have like little trinkets around here from some of the companies. But when I went to Chesapeake's meeting, first of all, I walk into this room and the TV was as wide as the room. And we're not talking about a small room. We're talking about an auditorium that seats several hundred to 1,000 people. And the TV was on the whole wall. And then we got our gifts, and there was a football in there, and there were golf balls in there, and there were golf towels in there. And then you had like a leather gym bag and another leather smaller bag inside of it. It was like excessive. So you think about all these things, and to me, looking deeper and questioning what you see, I mean, I think that's kind of one way that you can get an idea of how much is truth and how much is not, or at least it makes you question it. And then there are ways, like I did deep dive accounting analysis to find issues, but it was the things that I saw on the outside that I questioned that really led me to do that.
Naturally, Phil returned all those gifts because it's unethical to do that. And he was waiting for the steak dinner at the Four Seasons. No, I appreciate the context, Phil. I think that's really important. When it comes to investing, you need to be looking for sometimes the softer part of the investment strategy, which you can't just put numbers to. Which kind of brings up the point of AI. A lot of people are using AI to make determinations based on numbers and going through numbers, but it can't discern whether well, maybe it can, but as far as I know, it can't discern whether somebody's being overly promotional or it takes a sense of context from other people and reality and how human beings operate within each other. So I mean, what are some of your thoughts, Barb? I mean, AI is becoming a big part of this. Like, how should people be thinking about something like that?
AI is everywhere. And myself personally, I use 3 or 4 different AI agents when I'm working. And one thing that shocks me is I might ask the same question to a couple of different AI agents, get totally different results. And more times than not, there will be inaccuracies in the responses that I receive from AI. Now, I've been around the block, probably more than most people listening. And so I have a basic fund of knowledge on investing and on the things that I'm typically working on. And so it's very easy for me to read through and go, wait, this is wrong. This isn't right. And what I always end up doing is I always query the AI agent, what are your sources? Because if they're giving me answers from Reddit and Wikipedia, well, that is bad. Okay. Those are not credible sources. And so sometimes I'll say, I only want high level sources. And even then, I have to check them. So there's no free lunch. You can't walk in and ask AI a question or ask AI to do your homework and they do it and you turn it in. You have to use it as a tool, as a supplemental tool to your regular job, your regular research, your regular investigation, and determine, is it accurate? Is it true? Does this make sense? And then you have to do a little work on your own as well. And I think that's so important because you don't want to just depend on AI to do everything for you and then subsequently later on realize that the stuff you're putting out, the stuff you are using in your job is inaccurate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation this morning with a client of mine who's an engineer, and we were talking about AI, and kind of agreed that if you think about the use cases for AI, the ones that are most useful, it's, hey, I know how to do this thing. I know generally the range of the outcomes that this should produce, and it'll do the work for me. And I can say, all right, this is approximately correct. But if you don't know how to do the thing, if you don't know what the outcome should be, how do you determine if it's correct or not? Right. And because at the end of the day, like, I don't know if this is going to be 100% accurate. Like, if I need it to be precise, I've seen outcomes where it gives me an answer which is wrong. And on top of that, the metrics are wrong. So I'm looking for like annual revenue, and it gives me like per minute revenue, even though that's nowhere to be found anywhere. No one ever asked that, and yet it's giving me per revenue, and it's wrong, and it's completely wrong. So you obviously have to keep an eye on it, but it is good to do a lot of the grunt work, right? Some of the research, getting the references, going online, finding references, finding research. It's really good at stuff like that, and of course you can parse through it. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways you can save time now, but I still don't think we're at the point where it's still not good at math. So if you're investing, you need to be good at math. So I don't know, Phil. What are some of your thoughts? I mean, you're an investing guy. Like, are you using this, or how does this impact your life?
So I definitely use AI. When it comes to investing, the only thing I've ever used it for is like I might have an ETF and I'm asking for comparable ETFs. Like the other day, actually, I have a new client and she had some Vanguard mutual funds and they were in tax deferred accounts. And we were thinking about putting her into ETFs. So I asked AI, does Vanguard have comparable ETFs to these strategies? And then they gave me some and I checked and it was right. I'll use it for that. I'll use it. Hey, I have an ETF that does this. I'm looking for other ones like it. And then I can go do my research. And I'm never asking it to pick anything for me. I don't use it in investing beyond that because I don't trust it enough to do that. And plus, there's a lot more disclosure that has to happen as an advisor if you start using AI in your investment process at any level. So, and I don't want to have to worry about that. So I'd rather just do it on my own. Uh, I have seen, you talked about math. There's been times when I've asked it a question and it's given me the wrong answer. And then I tell it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, okay, but I could do that in my head. Why could you not get it right? But where I really like to use AI the most is when I meet with clients because and the client has to consent. And I have occasionally a client says, I don't want to do this. But when I meet with a client, I record the call. And what happens is when I'm on the call, I don't have to take notes because I'm really listening. So I know what they're saying. And when we take notes, we lose track of what somebody's saying because you're trying to get the words down and you might not hear everything, you miss things. So that doesn't happen. And since I've listened better, I can ask better questions. And then what I do is when the call's over, I take this summary that AI generates for me and I put it into my CRM and I edit it because it's still not 100% right. But again, because I've listened, I know where the errors are and I know what I have to fix. But it's made that whole process so much better. And it used to be that you take the notes and then you got to either you could scan them and put them in, but that doesn't make them searchable. So you end up trying to type them and get them in. And there's a lot more time and effort that comes into it. So it simplifies the process. And like I said, it makes for better conversations. And allows for better listening and better questions. So that's my favorite use case. I did take an AI course and I spent some time building out AI's understanding of what I do. So a lot of times when I'm doing things, I use AI kind of like as a partner, as a as a thinking partner. I'll say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think?" And like for example, I'm thinking about starting a new marketing activity with a friend of mine. And I've taken the transcripts of our calls and the transcripts of a service provider that would help us and some other things and put it in and had it help me synthesize and go through it. So I think it's really helpful for things like that. Barb is right. When you ask it to do research, I want to know sources too. And then I want to know which sources, like even before we had AI, if I look something up, if I'm looking at a tax issue, I want to know where that answer came from because, like she said, if it came from Wikipedia, Reddit, I don't think I can trust it. If it comes from the IRS, if it comes from a reputable tax or legal firm, then that's good, right? But I'll tell you that I read about a tax case recently where somebody relied on something in an IRS publication and the IRS on audit challenged it and they went to court and they lost. And it was in an IRS publication. So even there, you have to be careful. So you want to know where the sources are when you're any answer that it gives you about something you're asking that requires thought process beyond stuff that you already know about. Like sometimes you can look at it and say you know it's right or wrong. But when you're asking for those areas on help with research, you want to make sure that you know where it came from so you can double check those sources. I also will have found and talk to other people. I use the paid version of some of the AI tools, and they tend to be better in terms of the output that they give. I've heard other people say that too.
Well, the moral of that story is don't trust the IRS. Just saying. I'm sure everyone else that's your first experience of that, but anyway, so we're gonna do kind of final thoughts here, Barb. Final thoughts, and where can people find more about you?
One final thought is networking is really, really helpful. Do not be afraid to reach out to someone that you've met on LinkedIn or that you know from your online communities and ask them some questions if you are looking for a job or if you're looking for more research and information. People are generally very, very happy to help, and that will increase your success. I am Barbara Friedberg. You can find me at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance and on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Barb. And Phil, final thoughts from you?
I love what you said about networking, Barb. I like to do mentoring. And so I went to Duke and the other day I had somebody from Duke that reached out to me and she's a senior and she's looking to she's going to graduate this year and she's asking for like tips and and to help find a job. I'm like, well, she went to Duke, so she can go to LinkedIn and look for alumni, right? And maybe they have connections to companies. Like just like she reached out to me, she could reach out to other people that might work for companies or in the industry that she wants to be in, and look for people that that know people. Like that's part of networking too. Don't forget about that part. And like Barb said, I mean, I know I'm willing. I do a number of different mentoring things. So I think it's important to give back. I think it's important to help others and to share the knowledge. So networking is a really important thing. I mean, I talk about it with my kids too. Uh, I'm Phil Weiss. My firm's Apprise Wealth Management. I know experiencing big life transitions can be stressful. My job is to help empower women facing new beginnings with the financial knowledge and tools they need to make self-assured decisions. My firm is Apprise Wealth Management. We'd love to get to know you. You can also visit our website at apprisewealth.com. That's APPRISE Wealth to read and sign up for our weekly blog. Thanks for having me today, Kirk. Enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Phil.
That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do. So invest in your life.